and welcome to this evening's webinar. We're going to hopefully get through tonight without any technical hitches, as we did last week. Tonight we've got Richard, who farms in Wiltshire on his family farm in Yatesbury. His farm works biodynamically since 2004 and organically since 1988. Richard is also a trustee of the Real Farming Trust and Wiltshire Wildlife Trust, and a visiting fellow at the University of Reading, lecturing in integrated weed management and rethinking agricultural systems. Richard did a PhD focusing on soil regeneration and has a vision of farming in the grace of nature and the service of all life. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Richard to talk you through how he's farming for thriving soils, plants and animals. And if you've got questions, just jot them down or pop them in the chat and we'll do all of the questions at the end, if that's all right. So over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Katie. Welcome, everyone. Lovely to see a few of you, and look forward to hearing any questions you've got later. So I've got some slides I'm going to share. Where did that go? There. Good. Can you see the slides?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Excellent. So, yes, welcome to Yatesbury. Yatesbury is in the North Wessex Downs. You can see in the background Cheryl Monument and the AFB World Heritage Site to the left. So it's a very historic and ancient landscape we sit in on the edge of the Marlborough Downs. We have been farming at Yatesbury since 1968, and we started organic conversion in 1998. I started farming in 1992 here. I took over from my parents. So at Yatesbury, we are sequestering carbon 10 times more carbon than we are emitting, and also 3 times faster than difficult to achieve global targets. Now, some of you won't even know what I'm talking about there, and even why we did this. Really, it all started in 2019 or 2018, even in September, when I was sat at lunch next to someone who said, "Oh, how do you feel about the vegan movement?" And I said, well, I totally sympathize with the amount of soya that's been imported from the Amazon basin, and it's terrible that the rainforest is being cut down. But we don't feed any of that food to our cows. Our cows only eat pasture, and after months of looking at these issues and looking at methane and what sort of greenhouse gas it was, I discovered that actually methane has a half-life of 8 to 10 years. Many of you might know that, and so it isn't the threat to global warming that it first seemed, because it degrades naturally in the air. So if you have a fixed number of cattle, actually you have a fixed amount of methane. Anyway, I'm still concerned about this, so I thought the only way to put this to rest on our farm is to do a carbon audit. And that's what we did in spring of 2019. And we found out, to our surprise and excitement, to be honest, that we were storing 10 times more carbon on our farm than we were emitting. So that was pretty exciting. And I happened to be finishing my PhD in the following year. And hang on, just trying to check it. Slides to change. Hold on, I just need to. Can it work now? Can't get slides to move now. Hold on. No. Ah, here we go. So the work I did for my PhD was about looking at our farming system and whether the incorporation of crop residues into our soil, leaving them in the soil, so not selling straw, for example, off our fields, keeping them to feed the soil, whether that made a difference. And what we found was in these graphs here, I'm not going to go into the detail, but it's just to show you that it's all been thoroughly done. We found that at depth, with the lays that we are using and the farming system that we were using, and I'll come on to that a little bit later, we are not losing any carbon when we're farming and growing crops. And indeed, if we have our lays longer than we would be now, then we're storing a lot of carbon even at depth in the soil, and this is quite surprising. A lot of these changes that happen in the soil take a long time to accumulate, and this experiment was over 5 years, and even in this 5-year time frame that we looked at, we were finding these exciting results. So, as I said, I'm not going to go into too much detail. This graph here shows that by lengthening the lay phase, so changing it from 2 years that it was in our experiment to 5 years, we could increase the amount of carbon that we're storing in our soils. So it's often thought that there's a fixed amount of carbon that we can store in our soils, and indeed there is. But by changing the length of the lay phase, so our rotation is in this experiment was 2 years of lay and then 5 years of cropping afterwards. And by increasing that lay phase, what we found is we could increase the amount of carbon that was stored in the soil. And for those who really don't like graphs, left those behind years ago, here's a image from space that shows the same sort of thing. So we actually found this map from 2011. So it's a satellite image that would have been taken in September. And I could see by the color of our soil what had been going on. And this was long before we'd done any of this research. So here you can see that the color of our soil is darker compared to the fields in the surrounding district. There are a couple of fields that are darker, and those were winter beans that hadn't yet been harvested outside our blue line. We weren't growing winter beans. Those were my neighbours. There's also, Katie, can you see my pointer in the middle? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I can
Great.
see the pointer.
So there's one field here that is whiter than the others. And normally I'd ask an audience, what you think, or students, what you think that has caused that. But we actually had that field in summer fallow. So we were cultivating it all summer, and there was no green cover, no crop, no green manure, no lay on that field. And you can see the detrimental effect that it had on the soil color compared to the other ones. And so that's definitely something that we haven't done since, because of seeing this image. So it's really exciting to see that as well, and a very graphic image of the change in soil color resulting from our farming practices. So how did we do it? Well, I've got a short video. If it plays, that's great. Let's just try it a minute. Are you seeing that, Katie?
Yeah, we can see that. There's no sound, but that's
No
fine.
sound.
It's got the subtitles, so
Good. So I hope you got a flavour of that. If you couldn't hear the sound, you can hear me now, I hope.
Yeah, we can hear you now. We
Good.
could all read these subtitles though, so no, thank you for that.
Yes. It's always something with videos. But there we are. Uh, what I'll do is actually at the end there's a link to the video. So if anyone wants to go back and see it, they can, and they'll hear the sound then. So how did we do this? How are we fixing carbon? The first point really is that we never set out to store carbon in the soil. And I would say it's a mistake to try. The thing about what we did is that we were creating more life in the soil. That's what we aimed to do. And it's the life in the soil that creates all those soil functions in terms of storing water, but also in cycling nutrients um, that are important. And a convenient way of measuring life, of course, is by measuring carbon, soil carbon, but also soil carbon measurements also measure death. So a dead soil that's got loss of dead organic matter can have a high soil organic matter, but that doesn't mean that it's functioning properly. So it's a lively soil that we need. So there are three parts to this process of building up the life in the soil. First, we need to feed it. This is the photo you saw earlier, and you can see that we have a diverse lay here of over 30 species now of grasses, legumes, and herbs, and also wildflowers in there too. So that is what drives our system. And it's very difficult to see what's going on in the soil. So this image from Cotswold seeds is very useful to give a visual image, to see that deep rooting species are a really important part compared to a monoculture, which would be on the left-hand side. So this diversity provides 6 different benefits that I'm going to go through. Firstly, it's the sampling effect. So having a diverse mixture means that you always have the best mixture possible for any part of your farm or any part of a field. We have quite large fields on our farm, so one end of the field will be different to the other in soil type, but we've also always got the best mixture. The location will self-select, so you won't find the same species in each part of the field or across the whole farm. They vary slightly. But what we've also found that as our soil improves, you get more species that find it good in more locations. And also over time, our lays we normally keep for 3 years now, at least, and the contents of the lay will change from the first year to the third year. We have some annual species in there as well, so obviously they're only there for the first part of the phase of the lay, and when they die back, that gives room for the slower establishing species like the herbs. So the second part is what we call a niche differential effect. Sorry about all these terms, but it's the ability of different species with different traits. So some might be shallow rooting, for example, and some might be deep rooting. So it means that they can fill their part of the soil, avoiding competition. Then we have the aspect that the number of species you have above ground in terms of plants actually equates to the number of species below ground in terms of soil biota or soil organisms, things like worms and bacteria and fungi. So if you have more species of plants growing, you have more species of soil biota. So it's really important to have crop diversity or plant diversity so that you have soil biota diversity too. Another interesting fact about these, the rooting depth, is that when you have more diverse species in your mixture, you actually have a greater depth of rooting. And this is perhaps counterintuitive. So when you have a monoculture like you see in these little mustard plants drawn on the left-hand side, if you measured their rooting depth when they're in a monoculture like that, and then measured it when they're in a mixture, the roots would be twice as deep in the mixture. So you're getting much better rooting depth in a mixture as well. Biocultivation. So this means that we have less work in doing our cultivations. So the plants are doing our deep cultivations for us. Once we as a conventional farmer, we found our soils in the 1990s were very compacted, and in order to repair that, we did have to lift the soil with a deep tined machine. But then after that, we found that the deep rooting species were able to stabilize that improved soil structure, and actually when we were using that cultivator later, we were starting to damage the soil, so we stopped using it. These ability for these deep rooting species to both cultivate and stabilize that soil structure is really important. And then finally, there's one other aspect that we found sort of by chance. Many of you will remember the drought of 2022. Actually, we were on holiday in Devon in July. We'd been away for a week and the whole countryside was brown. You probably remember it. Much worse than this longer drought that we've had this summer. It was much more intense, much hotter, in fact. And I was wondering how our diverse ley was performing at home, whether it had gone all brown or whether the deep rooting species were fine. And we drove back to Wiltshire. The whole countryside was brown again. And I thought, oh, I must go and see the crop. We drove out to the field straight away, and it was all green. To my surprise, the deep rooting species were green, clearly finding moisture, but also the shallow rooting species were green as well. And clearly there was some sort of cooperation going on between the shallow rooting plants and the deep rooting plants in this situation. So what we're finding is the soil life, these arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi that connect and feed the plants, they are actually linking up and sharing resources between plants. And this was really exciting as well. And so this has taken time to achieve, but really important. So that is what I call a biocommunity effect, the fact that when you have a living soil, actually the species connect with each other, share resources, and communicate. And so that's actually then getting much closer to what nature is, this when we've got plants that are joined up and communicating with each other. So this arbuscular mycorrhizal connection, here you've got an image there showing those, you can see the brown roots being, sorry, the brown features here being roots, and then the fine mycorrhizal strands there, which are joining into the roots here. They actually join between the root cells. You've got a plant here and a plant here, and the mycorrhizae will be connecting between them. So the second part is spreading soil life. So we've been feeding it with diverse plants, and now we need to spread it around the fields and between fields. And this is really where the cows come in. Cows are really important in this aspect. We have a pedigree herd of Aberdeen Angus. We use a system of what we call dynamic rotational grazing. And that means that in the spring, when the crops, the diverse lay is growing quickly, then we will move the cows on every 3 to 6 days. And that the principle there is that you don't want the cows to come back and eat the plant they ate a few days ago before it has a chance to establish. So, and that's about 3 to 6 days in the spring. When the plants start slowing down in the summer, August and September, and through into the autumn, then the cows have a bigger area. We're busy harvesting, so that also fits into our time management. And then through into the autumn, the cows can have as bigger area as we can find on the farm. And this leads into what we call our forest farm approach, in that the trees are having access to both the hedges and the woodland, and as much area as they can roam around in the autumn. The only restriction on our farm is the rights of way that we have going through the farm. So if we didn't have byways, we could actually let them roam everywhere and perhaps fence off the crops. But we're restricted by the rights of way. So the principle is we're trying to give them as much land so that they can all be together, or go and drink together, or go and eat together, or lie down together, so they can exhibit their herd instinct. And that's what we call a reverence for the cattle. And the last part of the spreading the soil is, Katie, you mentioned that we were working biodynamically. So there's 3 parts to that. Firstly, it's the preparations. So we use carefully composted cow manure, and we spray that. And you saw me out in the sprayer in the film. That's spraying carefully composted cow manure onto the soil when the plants are growing most actively. It acts like a soil inoculant. So that's the first part. There are other preparations as well. Second part of biodynamics is having a closed farm. So we don't bring on inputs except diesel for our tractors, obviously, or to dry our crops. Some small seeds that we can't grow ourselves. We do save clover seed that we harvest with our crops. So we do save some clover seeds, but our diverse lay mixture is quite specific, so we have to buy that in. And when we're growing a new type of cereal, perhaps we'll be importing seed. And then the odd bull, when we want to have a new genetic strand into our herd, then that's the other time. Otherwise, we're not bringing on anything to the farm. So the third part of being biodynamic is that we treat the farm as one whole farm organism. And in the film, if you were able to follow it, that was explained in the way that the predators that go and eat the pests in our crops actually live in the woodland. And so the woodland and the margins and the hedges, they're all as important as the crops in our fields, because without those vital areas where the predators live during the winter, we wouldn't be able to cope with any pests that come to our fields. So treating the whole farm as one organism is really important. Hang on, I think I've missed. No. So about this spreading the soil around, this aspect here, Alex Podolinsky, you see his name at the top, is a biodynamic farmer that was in Australia. He died a couple of years ago, but he inspired me to work biodynamically. And he has this way of viewing how plants feed. And I think it's really important as a concept, and has really changed the way we use manures, for example, and make sure that our plants are vital and healthy. So you can see a plant on the left, and this is where the nutrients in the soil are held in the stable soil material. On the right, we have, as we used to farm in the 90s, plants that are fed with artificial fertilizer or slurry, it indeed would have the same effect. And the nutrients there are held in the soil water. So it's quite different. So we've got natural plants on the left and chemically fertilized plants on the right. And what happens on the right is that the plants transpire, they drink, taking up the water, but at the same time, they have to take up the food that's in the water. They don't have any choice. Effectively, they're force-fed. Oh, I'm having problems with my... Here we go, I have to do it by hand. Whereas on the left-hand side, when the plants transpire, natural plants, they're just taking up water. And the plants feed through either the fine hair roots or the mycorrhizal exchange of nutrients. So there's that other photo a couple of slides ago where you saw the mycorrhizal fungi spread out into the soil. What happens is those collect the nutrients from the soil and they exchange with the plants those nutrients for glucose that the plant supplies. And so the plants only exchange what nutrient, what they need, and you therefore have balanced plants. Whereas on the right-hand side, when they're force-fed, these plants, the cells expand too much because they are taking up nutrients they don't need or want, and you get this cell bloating. The cell wall becomes thinner, and then they're more prone to disease. And you get this blue-green color that you're very familiar with in the springtime and in fields. And this will lead to pest and disease. And it also leads to a bitterness if you're and if you think about pasture, when cows put their cowpat on the pasture and you get these pock marks where you get very vibrant, dark colored plants, usually grasses, around these pock marks, the cows don't eat it, do they? And that's exactly because there's too much nitrate in those plants that's come from the cow manure. And it's the same process as if you're feeding artificial fertilizer. So those plants are overfed, the cows won't eat it, and they just leave it. So because it's very bitter. So we want to try and stick to the left-hand side here. Plants are more balanced, more resistant to disease, and in their natural state. Right. And the third part is caring for what we've created. And there are several aspects to this. We call how we till our soils light tillage. So we don't plough. We haven't ploughed since 2003. And we use smaller tractors and lighter cultivators. So we do have a passionate team. It's great, a very young team at the moment. I've got two sons who are working part-time on the farm. We've got a young assistant farm manager as well, who's great. He's 25, sons are 25 and 22. And then we have a stock lady who's 19. And we're busy calving at the moment, actually, which is all going well. I think they've had 5 more calves today, which is great. And so caring for soil life, one of the aspects, and I've alluded to earlier, is this having diversity of plants in the soil. And when we are growing cereals, in order to achieve that diversity, what we found is that the weeds can provide that biodiversity. So we need the right weeds, of course, but we actually want those small, uncompetitive weeds in the bottom of the crop because they are feeding the soil life and keeping the diversity of organisms that's in the soil when we're planting cereals. So they're really important. Crop competition is important because some species, like oats, are much more competitive with weeds than others. Spelt, which is a type of wheat, is also more competitive. modern wheat varieties are not very competitive with weeds, as many of you will be aware, because the competitive trait has been unwittingly bred out of the plants. And I say unwittingly, and that's really important part of it. You know, plant breeders haven't thought that weed competition has been an important trait for crops in the past, and so it just hasn't been looked at. 3D sowing is about how we sow the seeds in the soil, but I don't have time to talk about it. Someone can ask me about it later if it's of importance. So in conclusion, on that bit of the soil, everything comes from the soil, including climate change. And you'll be able to look back later and see the details down there about how much carbon we've lost from the soil, and as that carbon that's escaped into the atmosphere. So just to recap, living soils make farming simpler, because having that diverse layer means that we've always got the perfect a mixture of species in our soil in any location or time by having that diverse mixture. So that's actually saving us time and effort on choosing the best mixture in any one place. We've always got the perfect mixture. So it's just an example of how it makes it simpler. We're more adaptive and makes it lower risk. As I was talking about, you know, when we've had a drought last summer and in 2022, we know that our diverse layer will grow. We are storing more moisture in the soil, so the moisture is there for our cereals to grow as well. So these living soils really are multi-talented. Oh, wrong way. Okay, now we might just pause here quickly and give opportunity for people to answer this question. If we've got an audience, I do like to just have a pause to get people to think for a second. So it's a question to you all. The positive outcome of anything can be condensed into one word, if you think about it. So if we think about everything that happens in education, for example, it could all the positive outcomes could be summed up into one word: confidence. Someone might have a better idea for that one word, but I think that's a pretty good summary. So what is that one word that sums up all the best aims of farming and food production? Anyone got any suggestions? Maybe Katie.
They all said sustainability. Claire, if you want to unmute yourself.
Well, resilience, maybe.
Yes, that's a good word. But so is that really an outcome? I mean, it's certainly an aim that we want to be resilient and want to be sustainable. But is it something that we are producing, as it were? So I'm thinking of something that we are something a little bit more than that, perhaps.
Someone said one health.
Health. One health or health?
One health.
One health, oh, well, as one word. Well, we'll just take the one bit off, but yes, absolutely, health. So health is exactly the word. And sometimes people say life. I've had that quite a few times, and it's a good answer as well. So life, because not just life here on the farm, it's life that we're trying to sustain beyond our farm in producing food, of course, and that's why the sustainable or resilience or sustainability bit isn't quite enough, because it's beyond our farm gate that we're trying to have a positive impact as well. And so the only thing about life, of course, is that we have life in hospitals, and that's not quite the sort of life that we're looking for. We're looking for health. And so well done, whoever said health, spot on. We're trying to create health on our farm, and it's health actually that creates that sustainability and resilience, if you like that word. But also what we want to be producing is food that's going to create health in the people that eat it, whether that's the wildlife, indeed, or the cows, or the people beyond our farm. So that's really fundamental to how we work. So here we can see a blue butterfly, which I forget its name, and I don't think it might just be blue, but certainly a blue color. So that butterfly is going to be healthy because it's eating healthy plants that are grown in our soil. So what we find is that actually health is infectious, just as disease is infectious. Lady Eve Balfour, who was the founder of the Soil Association, wrote in the 1940s here that the health of our soil, plant, animal, human, wildlife and planet are one and indivisible. So it's not just that, you know, if you have a healthy soil, it makes a healthy plant and in turn a healthy animal. It works both ways. Excuse me. So having healthy plants creates a healthy soil, and vice versa. So it's this indivisibility that's so important, and we're seeing this with climate change now as well, of course. And I think we saw it in the coronavirus epidemic too. So health on our farm. Anecdotally, we were seeing, I love this picture, which was, this was a little bit of wheat, a strip of wheat that I missed in one of our fields 18 months ago. And a local photographer took this photo of goldfinches, which was rather lovely. But it's really the people who come to the farm who see the life and health on the farm that is always so pleasing. So from an insect point of view, we have a guy who comes and does fencing, and I remember many years ago him saying, "Oh, Richard, when I'm fencing, you know, there's so many bugs in your hedges," and I say, "Oh, I'm really sorry, Fred. That's must be very annoying." He said, "No, it's great because wherever else I go fencing, there aren't any." And so it was really lovely to have that comparison. And again, it was another contractor who was not complaining, but comparing how big the hares were on our farm, and so on. So we have done some biodiversity monitoring, which was funded by the North Wessex Downs National Landscape, and they found recently that we have 10 red-listed bird species on our farm, which is great. 11 species about of the 17 that are breeding in the UK, many species of dung beetles, and there were other things they found too. So we're very grateful to have the opportunity to do that work, because this sort of monitoring is actually very expensive, because the only proper way to do it is by getting experts, ecologists, entomologists, or bird-loving people to actually go and identify them. So it is expensive and time-consuming. So we're very grateful. So in the top left-hand corner, you can see a picture of us combining fielder spelt, and you can see underneath that proper spelt that it's green still, and that would have been either where we'd undersown it previously, or where we've got weeds that are keeping it green. So once we've harvested the crop, we already have the soil covered and protecting those weeds and clovers, whatever's growing there, will be protecting the soil ready for the following crop. So I'm going to skip through some of these slides because there's quite a lot of details here, but just more on biodiversity really, and the importance, just to understand that there's a particular moth or caterpillar here. You can see the black and white stripy caterpillar on these ragwort plants. They only live on ragwort. So just to be careful if you think that you have a plant that's a bit of a pest, just give a thought for this deer moth that only lives on ragwort. And this is about the indigenous control. What I mentioned earlier about pests being controlled by predators that would live in the surrounding countryside. And there's many examples here, which Van Anden was a professor at the University of Reading, a colleague of mine, who was writing about this in the 1960s and how important it was to have grass margins or hedges around your fields so that these predators have places to live. There's if you're interested in the economics of biodiversity, there's an excellent video there about a government-sponsored report actually about the importance of biodiversity globally. This is something I lecture on at the University of Reading. It's just to give you a flavour. So what we talk about is how we feel about weeds. Try and ascertain why we have weeds, their importance, and what type of weeds we have in our soil is important to observe, because then we can understand the state of our soil. So if we've got pioneer weeds, for example, things like docks and couch and thistles, there's a reason for that. So they're trying to repair the soil. They're nature's repair mechanism. What we find is through a system of natural succession, as the soil improves, so the species of weed changes. Just going back to crop competition, here we have some research that was done here showing that when you plant in a network fashion rather than in wide rows, so on the right-hand side here, so what we've got here is oilseed rape grown as a weed amongst wheat. So on the left-hand side, I think we have a wide row spacing. In the center, we've got narrow row spacing. You can see the wheat in lines. On the right-hand side, the wheat's grown in a network pattern. So each seed is identical difference from every other seed. Really difficult to achieve, but you can see there's much less weeds in that situation. So that's what we're trying to achieve when we're seeding. And that's what we're aiming for with our 3D seeding method. I'm not going to go into these. Just a little bit about yield, because I'm always asked about yield on our farm. I mentioned in the film that I've always focused, even as a conventional farmer, on the cost of production, and it's so important because we can easily spend too much money on our crops. It's easy to get a high yield, but there's an old adage that turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, and it's important just to remember that, because the costs of achieving those high yields aren't always borne on the farm as well. So that was just so I remember when all this was yields, that was Private Eye magazine. Some of you would be familiar. A few months, probably a year ago, when there was a lot of talk about sustainable farming incentive, for example, people putting down lots of crops for wildlife rather than having crops for food. Anyway, so here you can see the impacts, negative impacts of high yielding, because we've got high rainfall event here, some snow on the mountains, and then we've got these brown plumes, soil being washed out to sea, very apparent in the Severn Estuary, for example. And those of you who are familiar with Western Supermare, or Western Supermud as it's affectionately known, that's why we've got all the mud there, because it's all washed out from further up. So yes, poor soil is one of the top unintended consequences. When we're talking about yield, we need to think about that balance between quality and quantity. And of course, we need to be thinking about changing the way that we set our goals. So perhaps one of the questions is, can we feed the world? Well, we don't feed the world at the moment. In fact, there's 3 times as many obese people as there are hungry people on the planet at the moment, which isn't good. And it's more a point of, will we feed the world in the future when we have hotter, drier conditions? And actually, what you find is that where you have organic crops, their ability to be able to cope with those hotter and drier conditions is much better than artificially fed crops. So a shift from quantity to quality is beneficial. What we found with the economies of scale is actually that small farms can have higher yields and higher biodiversity. So that's important to think about. I would suggest that we need a shift from agricultural intensification to ecological intensification, and from sparing a bit of land for nature to actually sharing our land with nature. So by inviting nature into our fields as we do, the weeds then invites the predators to rebalance the crops, for example. So what to do going forward? Well, what we've done is create the best living biodynamic soil that we can, because this cuts costs, secures our farm output in adverse conditions, and serves us all in the point of view of storing water, stops flooding further downstream, for example, and increases biodiversity that we all benefit from. If anyone's in fear of organic bureaucracy, I suggest that you can get help from the Biodynamic Association in order to understand what that means. And it can be a bit of a mountain to climb when if you think you might be interested in going organic, for example. But there's help out there. Make sure you get what's free. So yeah, that's what we're looking for, is farming in the grace of nature, and the service of life or health. Grace of nature in that we're looking for natural systems to be helping us along as farmers, so that we have to do less work. The natural systems just guide how the plants grow and look to provide healthy soils. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening. There's some links there and references on this page, some other videos to watch if you're interested. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Richard. Did you want to stop sharing, and then if anybody else has obviously got the videos on, we'll be able to see everybody else or others. Has anyone got any questions for Richard? Somebody must have a question. You've stunned them all to silence.
Explained, of course.
You've stunned them all to silence, or given them so much detail. It's nobody knows what to ask.
Trying to soak it all up.
How many years has it taken? I know you said you took out, or you joined the farm back in the 1992, was it? But how many years have you been looking to change and improve the soil?
Well, yes, I came home to farm in 1992. I've been away doing other things, and I was very conventionally minded there to be honest. My undergraduate course was in agriculture at Reading as well. I'd done some organic modules, but didn't think it was for me at the time. And then I came home to farm, and I thought, oh, I'll really get this farm going, financially and agriculturally. But the more I pushed it, the more it resisted. And as it said in the film, the quality of our soil just diminished right in front of my eyes. But even as a student, I always remember thinking or choosing the soil modules, because I've always valued the soil. I probably didn't know what I was valuing at that point, but I realized that that was our greatest asset. But I didn't realize quite how much damage I was doing to it at the time. So, and then having seen that, the damage I was doing, we then started organic conversion in 1998, and started working biodynamically when we'd finished organic conversion in 2004. But it's an ongoing process. That's the thing. These life processes are a constant building up. If you stop, then everything around you, it's a bit like if you stop eating, you stop exercising, and then your health deteriorates. And but you're constantly having challenges to that, whether it's drought or flood or whatever might come along. And so it's a constant tweaking and adapting and new things and learning stuff from other people as well.
Okay,
I
Claire.
can see some questions and hands up.
Thank you, Richard, for the talk. 2 questions. The first one is, you mentioned about high quality compost. So can you talk us through that? Are you using farmyard manure, or are you composting it on your crops?
Just farmyard manure. Sorry,
just farmyard manure. And then the second question I've got to remember now, in regards to organic with your cattle, with things like antibiotics and ivermectins, is that an issue, or are you can work around that, or I'd just like a bit of information on that side of it, really?
Absolutely.
Because that's
just
where
going
I
back
worry
to
with organic.
yes,
Converting to
okay.
organic.
Well, it's a very good question then. So just going back to manures, we use very small quantities of very carefully composted cow manure, which we stir in water, warm water, and then spray on the fields. That's a soil inoculant. So that's very low dosages. That's something slightly different. So we also have farmyard manure from the cows being in the winter. We take that into the fields. We then have a choice of 2 processes. Either, certainly at the moment, we can't be spreading that on the field. So we put it in a windrow, in a line. As soon as we have access to the field, we'll be able to turn it over. There are biodynamic preparations that we put into that compost to help it transform, to help it compost. And then we'll spread it out at some point. Alternatively, there's something called sheet composting. So if we get the opportunity, we can take the manure straight to the field, spread it on the field, and then spray our biodynamic preparations onto the compost in the field. So it's like composting it in situ.
Right.
But it's definitely a farmyard manure, not a slurry. So we never produce a slurry. All the stuff that we scrape up in the yard gets mixed up with, we actually use wood chip mostly for bedding our cattle. So it's all mixed. So there's no slumping, there's no liquid manure that comes out of it. So that's really important. So just going back, the other question. So yes, reverence of cows, absolutely important, fundamental. Making sure that they're healthy. If they get ill, then we will treat it. Yes. Generally, the cows don't get sick. I'm trying to think whether we used any antibiotics on our cows last year. Not sure.
Do you vaccinate a lot for different things?
No.
No.
So ivermectin you asked me about. So we never use any wormers.
Right.
So we don't need to, because of the rotational grazing, because of the healthy animals. Also, some of those plants in the mixture, like sainfoin, lucerne as well, I think, and chicory, and natural anthelmintics, one of those difficult words. So they naturally work against worms, or the antagonistic type of worms, the ones we don't want. So we don't find we've got a problem. We're not intensively grazing. Animals aren't grazing the same paddock. We've got rotations going on. So we never use ivermectin. Don't need to. And of course, that means that we're not putting poisons onto the pasture that's going to kill the dung beetles, of course. So that's really important. Antibiotics I mentioned, we do use antibiotics on our calves. So those are obviously tiny doses. If we get a sick calf, then of course we are going to use whatever remedies we have. We're hoping to be in a preventative situation that we're not going to get diseases. That's what we're obviously aiming for. But occasionally, we will get a sick calf and we'll treat it accordingly. So health and welfare of the animals is absolutely paramount. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
No, thank you. Just one thing on the farmyard manure. So we use a lot of farmyard manure on the farm, but we don't compost it. There's obviously massive benefits, or you've seen those benefits of composting it to just using farmyard manure then? Like,
yes, I mean the main thing is making it more stable. So if you're spreading manure that's fresh and quite liquid, you end up with that situation where you've got the red mist, if you like, in the soil.
Yes, yeah.
So you're feeding the soil water rather than the soil life. So that's really the benefit. Yeah, and if you compost it, you're getting more of the good organisms that are then feeding the soil and spreading that life that's in the soil.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Claire. There's a question here from Dale. Do you outwinter the cattle under the trees?
No, is the easy answer. So because we do have a little bit of downland, which we bought a few years ago, but it's not immediately next to our farm here. So we would like to, but our soil's quite high in clay. And if we had our cattle out in the fields now, they'd be damaging the soil too much. So the system we've produced is that we bring them in whenever the soil gets too wet to carry them. So this year it was sometime in November, I think it was. So we'd had quite a bit of rain. So many years ago, we'd have had to bring them in much earlier, probably 3 weeks earlier. But we're finding that having improved our soils, we're able to keep them out longer. And also giving them access to trees helps with that aspect, because when there's trees next to the pasture, they can go and shelter under the trees when it's raining. So that's saving the pasture some of the damage. So yes, we're leaving the cattle out longer, but not totally. They do come in for the winter.
Okay. Sean's said his farm used to be run organically for over 10 years, and in that time they developed a big problem with docks. How do you deal with docks?
Docks are definitely an interesting one, and I go back to the fact that weeds are showing something that's going on in your soil that needs repairing. So we have docks on our farm, and we can control them if we want to, where we're in crop rotation through the cultivation techniques we use, but it's quite expensive to do that. And what we find is we don't actually need to. I'm happy to cope with a small number of docks in our fields because they're not increasing in numbers. So the odd dock here and there isn't a problem. But if you've got a lot of docks in your fields, the soil's being compacted for some reason, whether the cattle are treading it when it's wet, or you've got a lack of deep rooting species that aren't able to open up the soil for some reason. The docks are there because there's a compacted soil, and they have the advantage over other species to inhabit that space, if you like. There's a story, some friends who farm down in Dorset. I was staying with them, old friends who staying with them a few years ago, and they were showing me a story that they had to just demonstrate this plant succession that happens. And so they had some fields. It's quite hilly where they are in Dorset, and they had some arable fields that they started to revert to grassland. Firstly, they just put the 6-meter margin around the outside to grassland, and they carried on farming the centre of the field. And there were lots of docks and thistles and weeds around the outside. And then some years later, I don't recall how many, let's say it was 6 years later, they stopped cropping the centre of the field and they put that down to grass as well. And what he noticed was actually the docks and the thistles had started to disappear around the outside of the field. So by not cropping it, the soil had improved itself. The need for the docks had disappeared, and they lost their competitive advantage, and the grasses had probably outcompeted them, or what other species they had there. And then when they reverted the centre of the field to grass, exactly the same thing has happened there as well. It started off by being lots of weeds, and as the soil conditions improved by not cultivating, not tilling, not ploughing, and not using chemical fertilizers, then the life in the soil returned, the soil improved, and the need for those species in that environment diminished, and the other plants became more competitive. And so it was lovely to hear that story, because it's quite unusual to be able to observe that. And I do think our greatest skill or sense perhaps is observation, to be able to observe things, not just to see them, because seeing them is just a passing glance, but actually to observe things is making sure you are seeing what's going on, and even perceiving. So I talk with our students about the difference between seeing, observing, and perceiving. And of course, perceiving is seeing beyond, or observing beyond, what you can see. So we can perceive what's going on in the soil by how the plants grow. And by observing the docks, I would suggest that the soil has been compacted, but you'd have to go back and with a fork and dig it to check. What saw a message there, something about red clover.
Or a big problem in fields that had well-established red clover. Should the red clover not have helped with deep rooting enough to help fix the compaction and outcompete the docks?
If it's just a monoculture of red clover, no. Goes back to my story about biodiversity. So you need lots of different species, because the grasses perform a different function in the soil to the red clover, and so you want the trade-offs between all these different species that work together in order to stabilize the soil and create all those soil functions. But really, ideally, you want to go out there and dig it and find out what's going on in the soil to cause the docks to give them the competitive advantage. Because what we found here is that the docks only germinate, dock seeds only germinate when the cattle have trod the soil, so compacted areas of soil. They don't germinate otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Rob, do you want to ask your question next?
Yeah, good evening. The wood chip you use to bed down with, what wood is that? Because I use recycled wood to bed my cattle down on, and with the chemicals in that, there's bound to be chemicals in it, upset the composting, or?
It may well. I wouldn't. We don't use any recycled material, so it's all virgin material. We have in the last couple of years, we've been trimming, shall we say, rather than felling, lots of ash trees where they got ash dieback. So we've been using that material. We had a lot of larch in some woods that the Forestry Commission wanting us to fell. So some of that wasn't good enough for timber, so we were able to use that. And we've had some other neighbours who've got ash dieback as well, so we've had that. So, but we always want to know where the source is, where it's come from, so that we can be confident about its health, if you like. I'm not worried about the the fungus in the ash, our good fungus will make sure that that doesn't cause a problem. So yeah, I wouldn't be using that personally, because there's bound to be plastic in it as much as anything else.
Yeah,
Because I'm sure they don't take all the little bits of plastic off the products when they tie it on. So
do
so
you
I'd
dry
recommend.
it, or do you dry it, or is it to make it more absorbent, or how do you?
Ideally, yes. But that just depends on the conditions, really. We've got a shed in the middle of the farm, which is sort of well located to store it. So we dry it as much as we can, but it's only air dried. Yeah.
All right.
But it's so much more absorbent. I don't know whether you find this. It's so much more absorbent than straw. When I remember when we used to just bed up on straw and you'd take out the manure from the shed, you'd get this urine smell where the urine was all over the bottom of the shed.
Yeah.
And when you use wood, it's so much more absorbent, and more effective. You just don't get that smell at all.
No, and it keeps cattle so much cleaner.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. No,
I mean,
excellent.
actually,
Thank you.
we use a mixture of wood chip and straw now. So when we got the calves, we haven't got quite so much wood chip at the moment. So the young calves are being bedded up on straw. It's a bit more cozy for them.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
I've got a couple more questions in the chat. Dale's asking, what stocking rate do you use for the cattle on the land, and how long are your rotations?
So the rotation that was in the experiment has changed because of the experiment. So because of what I learned from it. So what we do now is we have 3 years of our diverse lay, and then we have 3 years of cereals. What was the other question?
What's your stocking rate?
Stocking rate. Yeah, trying to remember, to be honest. So we have quite a low stocking rate. We are restricted by the number of sheds that we have. And I think, let me think. So it's about 1 per hectare, is that right? Or 0.75? It used to be 0.75, and I think so. We're about 350 cattle in the summer, and we're 670 hectares. About half of that is pasture, so that's about 1 to 1.
And I think the question was asking on your rotational grazing, how long are your rotations?
In the grazing, yeah. So as with everything, of course, it depends, but we're looking to come back and graze again between 4 and 5 weeks.
Okay.
But because we've got plenty of pasture, it doesn't always work like that. Sometimes it's longer, and sometimes we swap and take a cut of hay or silage either before or after is quite common. So they don't always necessarily go back to the same field.
Okay. And the last question from Billy, how have your yields of grass and cereals changed over the past 20 years since you've been improving your soils?
Yeah, I think so. The thing about ploughing is it releases a lot of nutrients. That's the nature of ploughing, and because you're killing the soil biota, so killing the soil bugs actually releases nutrients, and you can get higher yields. So I would say that it's changed from more. So what we were finding in our rotation is that we'd get a higher yield to start with, but then it dropped off more towards the end. Now we're getting a more stable yield across the rotation, I would say, because if you go back to that image, the 2 images of how the different plants are fed, because the nutrients are being held in the soil rather than the soil water, means that the nutrients are there for longer in the cycle. So more stable yields. And even last summer, when we had a drought, and I believe that some neighbouring farms who were getting similar yields to our organic yields, as it were, which was a surprise. So what we're finding is stability. Doesn't matter if it's wet or dry. we're getting a sort of similar yields in both conditions, which is obviously very positive for us.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for sharing your farm story really with us all tonight, Richard. I'm sure there's loads of other thoughts and questions, and what I'll do when I share the recording, I'll look at the end and try and share those actual links on the recording, so people can just click on those and access those really easily. So thank you very much for your time this evening, and thanks everybody else for joining us this evening, and hope you enjoy the rest of the evening that's left of it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
See you again. Bye
Good
bye.
wishes to all. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you, Richard. Bye bye.